Hello, everybody, and welcome to the House Salt Book Club for what month?
It was supposed to be July and August.
July and August. So we knew that these months were going to be a little bit hectic, so we combined them, and we are now doing the two books that we picked for these last 2 months, which are the Carl's Duology. So an absolutely remarkable thing and a beautifully foolish endeavor by Hank Green. And my name is Marines. My channel name is My Name is Marines. And I gave the first book 4.5 stars and the second book 5 stars. I love these.
Yeah, Madi was the one who was like, we're reading these two books for the next 2 months. Okay, thanks. Hi, I'm Sam from Thoughts on Tomes. First book, I guess I gave 3.75, maybe 3.5. And second book, I would say 4, I think.
I'm Connor. My channel is just Connor O'Brien. I gave the first book like 3.5 to 4 stars. The ending was not my favorite. And then I actually haven't finished the second book yet. I'm 42% of the way through, but from what everyone's telling me, I'm not that far from being done with the actual book. So I'm not loving it, but I mean, there's still like 50% of the book left.
Hello, everybody. I'm Paige from Minimal Bookie, but now called Paige Felicia because I changed my channel name a time ago. I read these a while back. Like, I read them as they were coming out, and I gave the first one 4 stars, and the second one was 5 for me.
I'm Jordan from the Jordan Journals, and I gave the first book 4 stars and the second book 3 stars, I think.
A little bit all over the map here.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So we're going to start with talking about the first book, then we'll talk about the second book, then we'll talk about any feelings about the duology as a whole. I will say that when I first read the book, I gave it, I think, like closer to 4, and it wasn't until reread and then reading the second book that I was like, oh, okay, I love it. So I really love like the thematic content. I love the messy characters. Like, it was just right up my alley. But I can also see why some of these things wouldn't be for everybody. So let's start with April May, who is a hot mess. A hot mess, especially in the first book. So how did you guys feel reading about her? Were you rooting for her? Did you want to punch her? Like, what were the feelings?
I was all over the place with her. So just to preface all of the character discussion, and I don't know if this was an audiobook specific phenomenon or not. I don't know what format we all read them on. I felt like pretty distant from the characters with the audio. Don't know why. It was a great audiobook. They used different voice actors and everything, but I just like wasn't super connected. So that makes it kind of hard for me. I definitely I liked her, and I was also glad when she I know we're gonna get to this, when she comes back around. But yeah, there's definitely times when you're like, oh, you're selfish. Like you are you've been with the drama. Are you the drama? Are you the villain?
I think you are the drama.
You know? So that was, but I liked that because I think it was really realistic. And sort of, I really do like stories like this, or they're not similar books, but it gives me similar vibes of The Magicians. Like when people that are normal get some kind of power, whether it's sort of this, social media personality, connection to aliens, or magic or whatever, they don't always do the best things with it. And so that I like that aspect of that theme with her.
Yeah, I agree. The way you said she's flawed, that's what I like. I like my characters to be a little bit messy because everybody's a little bit messy, and it's more interesting to read about a character who isn't perfect, who's a little bit narcissistic, because that adds to why she even became an internet personality in the first place. So I found myself not relating a lot to April May, but understanding a lot of the choices she made as a millennial internet person myself.
Yeah,
I agree with Sam. Oh. You want to go ahead? Oh,
nope.
As I agree with Sam, I felt a little distant from the characters. I listened to part of the second book on audio, and even as I was reading them, I didn't feel super connected to them. So I don't really have any strong opinions on any of them. She was fine. I liked her, and sometimes I didn't like her. I don't have any strong opinions about her.
I found her interesting. not necessarily that like I wasn't rooting for her or anything like that, but I could understand why she was making the decisions that she was making, which made me invested in like how everything was going to play out. But I didn't necessarily like her.
Mhm.
So it was just kind of watching her as she was heading towards a train wreck and like getting wrapped up in everything that was interesting. But I didn't like love her or anything.
I think
Yeah.
that in the first book, I felt that I did feel that the like supporting characters were a little bit distant, a little flat. But I think that a lot of that in the first book is because April May is so selfish. I know I'm already crossing over into book 2, but I loved in book 2 that we start with Miranda and she's like, April May didn't tell you anything about my PhD program. So here's what I studied. Like everybody starts that book being like, April May didn't tell you anything about me. And so you get really the sense that the reason that they're flat in the first book is because April May is selfish and she's got this tunnel vision and she doesn't, she's not always interested in telling you about the people around her. And I did love April May. And I think that a big part of that is that like I understood her compulsion sometimes. Like sometimes she would do something terrible would happen and she's like, and I pulled open Twitter and I tweeted about it. And I'm like, baby, I like those feelings. I feel it. And just everything about how she's processing the world and her art background and the like knowing in your head that something is a bad idea, but like not in your heart and like going into it. Like all of that I found incredibly relatable and like a really real feeling 3D sort of character. And you don't always get to see sort of the messiness of characters that way or their like flawed thinking. And I think that this book just did a really good job of letting her show us like all sides of her, which you don't often get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely the way that like internet personalities were done in here. Obviously it's Hank. So like if anyone was going to do it well, but I'm so glad that he did do it well because so many fucking books will have someone be like a YouTuber or whatever and they don't do it right. So like as people that actually do it, I was like, thank you for actually like the way that again, the running to Twitter sort of having this like her awareness of having a brand and like that kind of thing, even though all of us are on like such a lower level than like her character was as far as like a personality and like the parasocial relationships and like all of that was done really well. And just the way that she was thinking about that all the time, on like because of how grand the scale was of what she was involved in was really interesting.
And I think part of it is also because she's telling the story like with hindsight now. Like that's the reason she's able to like critique herself and be like, I was being really messy at this point. Like I don't like the way I was at this point. And I loved that element of it as well, especially carrying into the second book too.
Yeah. Yeah. And go ahead.
The way that she like noticed things, even in the first book, where like I think it was like Miranda and Andy, like she makes a comment of like there was probably a crush there, and I was so unaware, and then I slept with Miranda because I'm stupid, like, and it's like, and even just the references that she was making throughout, she's like, before I died or became like not human, and you're like, excuse me, like,
I know.
girl. So you're just waiting for like, I like when books do that because then you're just sort of like waiting, like, how is this going to happen? What's going on?
Yeah, I really like that the way that it was told in the first book too, that it has that sort of like future knowledge because the I don't know, the narrative style is really chatty. It's just like somebody talking at you, which will work for some people. Not, I think it worked for me because I listened on audio. So it was literally like somebody sitting down and be like, and then I went, like that's how it felt. But I think that if you're reading it, that narration style might like get to some people. But I think it fit, especially with like the removal of her telling us from a future, like, let me tell you this wild story. But yeah, all of the themes about the internet stuff was so good, so good, and I think it kind of explored something that you don't often see because people will include like, yeah, I'm on YouTube, but they never really talk about like the power dynamics in like being famous or like having a platform or like the parasocial relationships. So all of that was included, from like the more outright stuff to when she does sleep with Miranda and she realizes like she just saw me, like how Miranda sees her like a celebrity, and like that relationship was never equal. Like all of that was fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Or even like again, book 2. I know we're just gonna bleed into both books, but like when Andy was making comments about like when people were tweeting him like mean things, and it was sort of like the mix of like people on his side versus not on his side, and how he would like be fighting back at them, and I was like, ooh boy, I get that. Like, you know, like someone's being sassy in your ass and you need to be like, shut up, like you don't know me. That kind of like feeling. I just really liked that, like all the little breaks that there were of just like, you know, at April May, at Andy Scant, blah blah blah, like with all of the here's what's happening in my online persona.
Yeah. And I think too, like a good part of that was when you see April May, like obviously not at her mental health best. And she's like, and then I sat down and read mean things about myself. Girl, I have also done deep dives into the comments I should not have done, like relatable.
That's like you going on Guru Gossip.
Yes, I mean, like, what are they saying now? So I can cry myself to sleep.
But it's like infinitely worse because she's like the head of everything that's basically happening. So like the entire, it's not just like our corner of the internet, it's the entire world that's either on her side or completely shitting on her, which is so much worse.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, even when she's like dead.
YouTube comments.
Yeah. Even when she's like dead and people are like, look at this cute video of April and Andy, and it's like that whole parasocial, like those people didn't know her, and they're like posting these like, I miss her, very reminiscent. I just got this, very reminiscent of the like Jenna Marbles, like I miss her, she's gone from the internet. I wonder if that was some of the inspiration behind that.
Someone at Hank can ask.
You're right. It's supposed to be about Jenna.
Okay, so you kind of already said that some of those like supporting characters were a little flat for you guys, but are there any that stand out, or any supporting characters you want to talk about, or any moments that stand out to you?
Man, why do I have to always talk first? So
just empty up here.
Right? No thoughts, just vibes. Maya's the girlfriend, right?
Yeah.
Maya and I think Andy by book 2 were my two favorites. Just because they're just Maya's putting April in her place is great. The way that their relationship eventually unfolded, because in book 1 I was like, Maya, why are you even with her? Like, ew. And then by book 2, it was like they like really built like a solid thing. And then Andy's stuff in the what's the thing called? Like the space.
Altus space?
The Altus space. All of his stuff kind of being like he gets pulled in and he's sort of feeling like important. He is like a cooler version of like the Xander character from Buffy, like where like he's like, I'm finally like sort of involved and like look, and you know the way that he gets sort of like addicted to that space because like hell yeah, like who wouldn't? Those two I think were the most interesting for me by book 2.
Well, I think that like by book 2, you get like that Maya character becomes more interesting because like you mentioned, we're seeing everything like through April's eyes in the first book, so like you don't understand why Maya's with her because April doesn't care why she's with her.
I just thought that is her name Miranda.
Yes.
I really thought that she was really interesting because she's brought in not knowing her at all beforehand. So like you mentioned that like she only views her as this like celebrity, and so like her way of thinking about April is so different, and then how she views her in the second book, at least like how she goes about getting involved in everything. She's like, she liked April, but she didn't get to know her super well on like a personal level. So like her involvement with April was able to be compartmentalized, and she was able to do this other thing on her own, which is why I thought that she was pretty interesting in the second book.
In the second book.
Because in the first book, she was just the person that April like emailed once in a while when she remembered.
Yeah.
And then like flirted with a little bit. Like
Yeah.
I love Maya so freaking much. Even in the first book, I was just like, you had those flashes of like her putting April May in her place, but also, and even through April May's point of view, while you don't entirely see, okay, like what does Maya see in April May, you kind of get it because April May is like super witty and like fun, and she has this gravitational pull. People are drawn to her, right?
Mhm.
So you can see that, but you very much see why April May loves Maya. She's so cool and
Mhm.
she's so like straightforward, and she's just doing her own thing, and all of the like additional little commentary about like being bisexual, being gay, being Black, like all of those things that were woven in, I thought were really well done, especially considering since Hank is a white man. So big up. But I loved all of that, and I love Maya's character as well.
I feel like surprisingly Miranda was my favorite, specifically book 2. I don't know, I just liked exploring her and seeing her do like her little spy on Alta's situation. I feel like she had the most interesting plot of everybody because she was actively doing something herself and making choices that led her to bad places. But Andy also really grew on me in book 2, and I liked seeing him sort of like fall into the same sort of pitfalls that April May did at some points, but sort of learning as he went, like not to rely as heavily on the internet presence and not take it as seriously as she did. But also Carl in book 2 was my favorite, obviously.
As the monkey.
Obviously. As a monkey, exactly.
Oh, we love
That
it.
was like my favorite part.
And somebody mentioned in the comments too that Peter was a great antagonist. And I agree with that, because I guess sitting here I'm like, no man, I hated that guy. And I was like, oh, okay, that means that was a great antagonist.
Uh-huh.
And it just felt, I don't know, reading it in this economy, and I guess this has been true since Hank wrote the books or whatnot, but it just feels so real to things that we're experiencing and arguments that you see online, and like living through a Trump presidency. Like, I knew exactly who these people were. I knew who Peter was as an antagonist, and it felt very real.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, there was definitely that, like a couple of times, and maybe because again of the audiobook, the way that they say Peter Petterwicki like all the time, like they use his full name, just got to a little bit much for me. I was like, stop saying his full name, because it was a little bit too like mustache twirling villain kind of feeling. But ultimately, yeah, like same, where I was like, was he? But I was like, well, yeah, I guess he was, because we totally all know the like dude that would have been on TV like demonizing her and then being like, I didn't know they were gonna kill you, even though I said that you were not a human. Like all that shit, and then using that power like that he just was condemning for his own gain. Like, of course, like that's real. So it's kind of in the same vein as like some of the villains that, aren't the big, huge magical villains, but that just feel more real. Those villains just do tend to be better.
I haven't finished the second book, but I've just gotten to the part where he's like, he asks Miranda like how much she hates him or whatever, and like her like, I feel pity for you was such a low blow. I was like, hell yeah. But like he even admits it. He's like, yeah, I suck. And I'm like, yeah, you do suck. So he's like a villain that knows he sucks, which is extra annoying. When you're reading
book 1 too was really interesting because I had all of these moments where I was like, April May, stop, where she kept doing things like off on her own and giving Carl, radioactive material, and just like heading off to this like factory in New Jersey. And you're just like, these are really terrible choices. So Peter starts like echoing some of these things. Like, you can't just act wholesale for all of humanity. And I'm like, I don't want to agree with him. This sucks. So there were those moments where you have like the talking points that were a little bit more salient, but then he goes off into like these super extremists like areas, and they're like, oh yeah, okay, this is the bad guy. So even though in some ways he felt mustache twirling, that felt more like a commentary on who I am as a person and my own political views. I thought that there were moments there that Green was really trying to show us like he had an argument, even if that argument was like trying to keep the world safe. It wasn't just like, I hate April May because she's a girl or something like, very flat that way.
Yeah.
I think there was also those elements in there. I think there was also some elements in there about that, but I do think that he like hid behind the "I'm trying to keep the world safe."
Yes, for sure. It was all smokescreen. Like he didn't
Yeah.
actually have an argument. But that's how people argue on the internet, right? It's
Yeah.
like Gamergate. It's about ethics in gaming. Like, no, it's fucking not.
Mhm.
But that's how those people come across, and that's how I don't know. He felt like that kind of villain, so it felt real to me.
Yeah, because you could understand why there was another set of people who were scared of the crawls. Because let's be honest, if some random thing, like at this point, we would all be desensitized. Let's be actually
Totally.
honest. We do not care.
Would you like take us away?
But back when he wrote it, we would have been like a little bit like sketched about something randomly appearing. So you understood that, but he totally appropriated those conversations and fears and used them to his advantage, which was super realistic for the time that it was written.
Mhm.
Yeah, if it happened now, I feel like all of us would
Literally,
be like,
please let it happen now.
give the Carl uranium stat.
Get him iodine.
Send me to that dream world where I have to solve puzzles. Let's just do it all.
When I first read this book, I think that part of the reason that I was kind of like 4 stars and like a little unconvinced is because some of the marketing and the lead up, I expected it to be more of a mystery. Like I expected it to be more about the Carls themselves and like the dream world and all that stuff. And when I read it, I was like, this is more about April May, and the alien stuff felt like very much in the background. Rereading it, I'm like, I don't care. I like the balance is fine. But how did you guys feel about, like, were you expecting more alien stuff? Was it a good balance? Did you enjoy the mystery elements of the first book at least?
I do think that I was expecting more explanation and like exploration of the Carls and what they were about and where they came from, or like I don't know, just seeing the world start to figure it out. But like you said, it was mainly just about April, and so I think that that's also one of those things that like affected my rating, at least, was that I was expecting a balance and where it was just all over here. So I totally understand if you reread it knowing what's going to happen, it's going to be better for you because you're not expecting something else than what it is. So yeah, it definitely affected my reading experience.
Yeah, that's why I preferred the first book better, is because it felt more like we were leading in that direction. Like we were going to learn more about the Carls and like where they came from and have more of like an outer space sci-fi adventure. Whereas it ended up turning into more of like this thing with April and everything. And so the second book, I went in with expectations that did not match what the book gave me. So I liked the first book better.
I didn't even know what the series was about. I just had the book because of work, and I knew like who Hank Green was, so I wanted to read it. So that I went in completely like unaware of anything. So I enjoyed it for what it was and what it gave me. And I'm not really hugely into sci-fi. I like things that are like soft sci-fi, where there's like elements of it, but it's more social commentary, and they introduce these elements like discuss the world, and that's definitely what this series is. So it was literally my perfect cup of tea.
I didn't know the synopsis or anything going into it. That's just like from reading the first book where I thought it was going.
I'm with Paige. I didn't know anything about this before I went into it. I just knew Hank Green first contact story. And the few first contact stories that I have read have actually been more like this anyway. I actually feel like this reminds me a lot of I think it's the Themis Files. I also read those on audio. A very similar experience where like I didn't get really attached to the characters. I could not tell you any of the characters' names in the Themis Files, but like the themes and like the robot stuff is very like still in my brain. So yeah, it gave me like that similar vibe. So I guess I was already kind of expecting something like that. I have yet to read a first contact story where they actually go into space. I would love that, but they don't. They just stay on Earth, and I'm like, why? Boring here.
And it's more about like our battle or commentary on humanity.
Right. It usually ends up, yes, how would we respond to aliens? And I'm like, I don't care.
I just want to know about
I will say,
where are they going to take us?
Take me away.
Please, away from here. The last first contact story I read was Axiom Zen by Lindsay Ellis, and it has a lot of similar themes, but it was much more heavy on the sci-fi. Like Homegirl told us everything about the aliens I never wanted to know. No, so I feel like this is Connor, that one's for you. Everybody else who likes a softer sci-fi, probably the Carls is more up your alley.
I did wish we knew more. Like, I don't know if I want every little detail, but the fact that we got to the end of book 2 and we still like don't
know where he came from.
I'm like,
anything about him.
Yeah, like who sent you? Why?
Yeah.
Like just kind of like you're supposed to sort of save humanity. I'm like, why? And then now I'm kind of wondering, like, did he leave a door open for like almost like a companion series to like, I don't know. Someone asked.
We don't learn much about his brother either.
Tag him on TikTok, right? Like the brother. I don't know. I'm just like, where is all this? So the fact that we don't really get like a conclusion with that, I think also left it where I didn't rate it quite as high. With the combination of that and then the lack of connection that I had to the characters, like overall, was why I got a slightly lower rating for me.
Yeah.
He truly had so much more hope for humanity than like I do at this point with the whole they're working together. I was like, sir.
That was pretty powerful. They all like stepped up to donate $10. I was like, "You go, dude."
I was like, that would not. I've run GoFundMe's. I know how this works.
Please send money to the BookNet Festival FundMe.
$10. If you all donated $10,
if you all donate $10, we can
$10 billion.
Yeah, Jesus.
But listen, I love that a big theme of this is like humans are great after all. I do love it. It's just a bad time for that.
It's been a bad time for like 5 years.
I know. And I love that is Hank Green's brand, is like reminding us that we are awesome and humans are awesome. And I know deep in my heart, I believe that too, but you know,
you're being tested right now.
I'm being tested.
Yeah.
Also, go get vaccinated, people, please.
I do agree. It did remind me a lot of the Themis Files, except I enjoyed those better than the series. I felt those were a little bit more spacey.
Sylvain Nouvelle.
Yeah.
Oh, the Artemis. Okay,
yeah, they're those bright color ones.
They're fun because it's like they're fighting in giant mecha robots. Like, you know, it's cool. Where this is just like, okay, Carl is like a statue and then he's a monkey. Like,
and I love that.
I never finished the Themis Files, and now I'm thinking I might not ever finish this.
No, they're
book.
Oh, but they're really good on
Themis
audiobook.
Files are fun.
No, I DNF'd the first one because of the fact that I was listening on audiobook and the characters are so flat. I didn't ever know who was speaking.
No,
I didn't ever know who was. They were interviewing people, and I'm like, "Who are you?" Like, you cannot differentiate between.
I could not tell you any of the characters' names. I know the two of them dated.
Oh, I couldn't tell you their names either. I just remember that I loved it.
All I know is that some of the narrators were incredibly annoying. Like, I hated their voices in my brain. And so I made it through book 2 because we had to read it for something, and then I'm like, no, thank you for book 3.
So I'm in the minority that prefers that to this series.
Yes.
I do too. Jordan,
no, I mean I enjoyed it. Ish. I just didn't like the audiobook experience. I'm not gonna buy them.
Maybe I'll pick up the physical copy, but I could not. I was like, who's even talking?
To be honest, sometimes with this book, I did forget whose point of view I was in.
With the second book?
Yes, especially with the second book. The first book, it's just from her perspective, right? In the first book?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In the second book, I kept being like, I don't remember who's talking or where I'm at.
I found that the second book, and this is why I didn't finish it in time, is that I kept finding it really easy to put down. Like, I'd finish a chapter and then it'd be like, Andy. And I'm like, okay, I can take a break.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, oh, Maya. I was like, okay, I'll read this in a little bit. And then I just kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And here I am, only 50% of the way through the book.
I had the opposite experience. I like put on the audiobook and I did not finish listening until the end because I was like on the edge of my seat. Like I was so worried about how this was going to turn out. And like Miranda in the lab, I was like, girl, you're going to get killed. Like I felt so worried that I couldn't put it aside. I just had to get through the end, rip off the Band-Aid of my anxiety.
I do think that now, so I got to the point that April comes back. I think that now that she's back, it's going to ramp up and things are going to start to like move. So I think that might be a contributing factor as well because I'm only 40% of the way through. And I was like, all right, nothing's really happening. You're all just kind of slowly floating along.
I didn't even notice that April wasn't in the first half of the book. And all of a sudden she's like, I'm back. Did you miss me? And I was like,
Jordan, where have you been? I hope it was that they're warning her.
Yeah, they're all like, she's dead.
But like, I mean, I knew that, but it didn't occur to me that we weren't in her head the whole time because I forgot that the first book was only her perspective. So I was like, oh, that's right. We haven't heard from her in a while.
I mean, it's just different. I feel like if maybe her being alive would have been more of a secret, because even in the first book, she's like, I died, but I'm not dead, so I'll be back. I'm like,
Right.
aw.
Like just her personality or like her persona of herself died or something.
Like her just,
yeah,
it's just, I don't know. I feel like when we started the second book and it was like, she's not dead, but here's this secret journal situation from whoever. I'm like, I don't know. I kind of wish that she was dead so that all these people would actually think that she was dead. Because half the
I mean, they
characters
all did think she was dead.
for a little bit. Well, Maya didn't, but then Andy's
Maya
like,
knew.
but then Andy's like, I've got this
Maya
magic
knew.
book that only knows things that she knew. So obviously
Yeah.
he starts thinking that she's alive too
Mhm.
straight away. I think that it would have been more interesting if some of them were acting, well, besides Miranda, if Andy also thought that she was dead completely and was acting like it.
Mhm.
I don't know. I feel like that would have been interesting. Ooh.
yeah.
I feel like for me, the mystery of like how she was alive was what kept me reading for the first half. Was like I needed an explanation of how she was alive because we had seen like the whole her getting like hit by the beam, etc., etc.
That was a little traumatic. That's
Yeah,
I was
that
like,
was a lot. Very surprising when that happened at the end of the book, because I thought it was a like single book. I didn't realize it was a duology. So imagine me going in not knowing anything about this book at all, and then she just dies at the end, and I'm like, what the fuck is happening? Now I have to wait for the second book to come out. So I like that was what was propelling me for the first half, and then the second half was like, how are they going to fix everything? Because they obviously do if they're talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that, like, you guys have talked about whether you prefer the first or the second book, but the thing that really sells me on this as a duology is that they are two different pieces of a puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
So I finished the first book and I was like, my complaints were, some of the characters were a little flat because of April May's perspective. And this is like a really big worldwide problem, but we got a very narrow view of it because it's just April May. And that was kind of like 4 stars. And then we start the second book, and immediately I tell you, I played the audiobook and I realized it was going to be multiple point of view, and I squealed because I thought it was just so smart for him to do the duology to fit that way, right? You get the narrow point of view and then you get the wide point of view, and you get April May's sort of role in all of this. But the second book felt a lot more about like, okay, what are people doing with this power? What is the like response? It felt much more bigger, like a much bigger scale. So I loved that both books felt different because it felt to me like actually a really great duology, that you needed both pieces of this story for it to be complete. It didn't just feel like one story cleaved in 2 parts, like part 1 and part 2. They felt like 2 distinct books that really complemented each other, and you needed both parts of the story to make it a whole. So I love that, but I can see that if you are preferring one storytelling over the other, like why one book would be worse or better than the other for you.
Mm-hmm. No, I actually kind of view it as like one giant thing too. Like if I were to give, I would much rather give like a star rating of like the whole duology, and it'd be like a 4-star duology for me. Like I think super clever, like you're saying, the way that it was done between like showing sort of her central viewpoint and how she affected everything, and then we sort of get like the ripple effect that she had on all the characters in the second book, and just again thematically, this landed for me completely. Like all of the discussions of how this would affect things and the internet culture and all that, perfect. It is just like the way that I personally didn't connect to the characters that much, that made it so I couldn't quite give it 5 stars, because there were times definitely in both audiobooks, although maybe the second one just because it was longer and I'm lazy, that like I just was like, ugh. Like, because the first book was like really easy to get through because it was shorter. It was like a 9-hour audiobook. So if you have it on 2-speed, like you're getting through that quick. That's like a drive. So that was probably like part of it too, where I was like Connor, where I could put it down. Like I wasn't super engaged probably until the last, like, I don't know, 20% of the second book. But as a whole, 4 stars.
So I agree. I think that this does read like it's one complete story, but I think that I have just a little hiccup because it is published as 2. So like this book, the first book came out however long before the second book came out. So all these people read this thinking that it was going to be like it's a little bit of a self-contained unit. And the way that the first book ends, which I can't even remember now, but like I remember when I finished it, I was like, this feels so like jarring and incomplete that it brought down my enjoyment of the first book, because there wasn't anything that like she dies at the end and that's it. So like there wasn't anything that I was like, okay, this has been kind of, I don't know, scooped up together to like view as, I don't know if that's the right like metaphor, but like I didn't feel like I'd completed anything when I finished it. So I read this book and then I didn't really have all that many feelings on it because it wasn't complete. I guess that's my view of like, when you write something where you need to read both parts, that's a way larger commitment than writing something that someone can read and feel accomplished with reading just one part and then, you know, continue on into the second part.
I'd argue though that's what makes it kind of impressive as a duology, because we've been told like a story needs to be told where each section is its own story, and he decided, no, I'm going to make it like 2 books that have to work together because like it's a contained unit as a duology. It would make sense if it was like you didn't know if you were going to get a second book, but he probably knew he was preempted for the 2-book deal and he chose to write it. Which
makes it interesting because like he knew he was going to be able to get both books published. A lot of people just get the one. And you have to be successful with that one to get the second. So like him having such a huge platform allowed him to write the book the way that he did, which is interesting all on its own. Because
I also wonder if he sold it that way though, like if he sold it as like it's going to be a 2-parter and this is, I feel like that's how it was probably sold to the publisher.
But if he was a no one, how would you market
he would not
that?
be able to do that at all.
So like it's just interesting that he was able to write this specific type of story in this way when no one else, well, except for like hugely successful internet people, would be able to do it that way. So
I will say that I think that the first book did feel complete to me in one way. So it wasn't complete in the Carl's duology, which is fine because books sometimes have, I mean, in the Carl's, like the mystery of the actual aliens, which is fine. That's a cliffhanger. But it really did feel complete to me as April's story. Like this one time I went internet famous and then I died at the end because I made terrible choices. Like that felt like a complete story to me. And even though she comes back in the second book, like a lot of it feels more like her part in like a larger story, not her story anymore. Her story is done. That part felt complete. So that's why I like the one complete story of her alone. And then the second story was like, okay, all of us together, how are we dealing with the rest of this Carl's mystery? So that's how I read it.
Yeah, it definitely, like, this whole idea speaks to sort of how people prefer series, right? And no one's, like, right or wrong. Like, sometimes you prefer more of, like, these contained, like, each book can kind of stand alone. And so then you're not feeling this, like, I need to read the next one, like, that pressure with the cliffhanger. And some people kind of like the cliffhanger. And neither one is wrong. I kind of sit in the middle where like it kind of depends on the story. Like I don't get mad at cliffhangers the way some people do. Like I'm not pissed off. I'm like, okay, I'll read that in a year like I planned on anyway. Like it's fine. But I do like kind of the series where one does deeply rely on the other in a more like when it does feel like a whole story kind of together instead of this like chunked thing. Again, why am I thinking of The Magician so much? But The Magicians feels very similar. Like you have to read the whole Magicians trilogy. I don't know why. They're like not even similar books. But anyway, they have like similar themes in my head.
I remember from like your videos from I don't know how long ago you read those.
Like
but
4 years.
Yeah, but when you first were reading them, you were saying that how like because you hate the characters so much in the first book or something like that, that you don't appreciate them until later on or something like that. And so you have to read the whole thing before you like the first you appreciate their situation.
Yes.
Everything that happens.
It is very similar actually, because with like April being sort of sucky in the first book and then Quentin in the first book, Quentin's kind of sucky throughout, but Quentin sucks in the first book. And the first book for The Magicians was 2 stars to me, but the last book was 5.
I would not. We'd have to pay me to read a second book in that series because
the second and third book are so good.
Quentin is not just sucky. Quentin is not just I'm selfish. He's a misogynist. And slut shaming and everything in that book, you would have to pay me to continue on in that series.
But Muddy, I will tell you something.
Find my Patreon.
Hold on. body. How would you feel if you got to see him suffer though for like
No,
2
I don't
books?
care. I don't care.
Because that's payment enough for me. Like that's where I was like, ooh, homeboy messed up. And now you're suffering for it. So that's what made it
You
worthwhile.
compared this series to 2 other series,
Uh-huh.
and I hated both of them. So
Why did you like this one? This one's a 5-star for you.
I feel like I shouldn't like this book, but I
You
kind of
shouldn't.
did. I think it's the themes, the thematic content really saved it in the end. It was much more positive and less problematic. But yeah, I think that's funny that you're like, this is like this other book, and I'm like, I hated that one.
Well, that just goes to show though what's so interesting about like like we always talk about with subjectivity and stuff. Like you can use similar elements in very different ways. Again, like I said, that series, like you still have shitty characters that are really selfish, but ultimately that Magicians is much darker and it has like a much darker outlook on life because it's about depression, where this is much more like, but humanity could be okay, right guys?
We
So
could all donate $10.
we could all donate
$10
to BookNet Fest so we can pay for this year.
I'm thinking now, like I started thinking, okay, what are other books with like really like selfish main characters or messy main characters like that I've liked or whatnot? And I think also, so it made me think about The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, because both is kind of, you know, a little Gary Sue there, and he's kind of awful sometimes. But I think what's interesting about April May is that she's like messy, but she's also like, she's not super powered. She's not like acing everything. Like she's not top of her class. You know what I mean? Like the chosen one in the sense of like,
was chosen.
in the sense of like chosen by the aliens, yes, but I mean in the sense of like her having the powers or ability. She got chosen by the aliens, but then she just messes it all up. She keeps making the wrong decisions. So that felt a little different.
They specify that it's not just her that's chosen. Like it wasn't just you. It was this specific group of people that you just happen to be a part of.
Yes. Yeah.
Like we needed those components, and it was sort of like you were sort of random and you gave us the best of odds. So that feels less magical.
Yeah. All right. Anything else about this book? The only page and I loved.
I gave the duology 4 stars. I didn't hate it.
I really liked the magical books that got sent out to everybody. I thought that was cool. Whenever somebody found a new magical book with like a really sassy narrator, I liked those.
I know, to remind me to eat and nap and take a walk. Yes.
That piece was funny or like interesting, especially towards the end when Andy's getting like super into the Alta space, and the book was like, you're gonna ignore this thing I'm telling you to do, and that's stupid, and he does it anyway. And I'm like, the book flat out told you that like ignoring your friends and doing all this was a bad choice, and you're still like boop boop boop, like of course,
because his brother's gonna like he's gonna be better at luring you in than I'm gonna be at luring you away.
Yes.
Yeah.
So at this is like such a stupid random question. So at the end of book 1, April May finds out that Robin, is that the assistant's name? Like like her agent is also Peter's agent. And he's been holding it back, and she freaks out. And then like Andy's like, not cool. And I was like, I would be mad too. So how did you guys react to that? Like, do you think that Robin wasn't like, would you be mad at that moment as well?
Not at Robin, because it wasn't really Robin's fault. It was Robin's boss, and he did hold it back. But like,
she's ultimately the one that
the one that did it, and I kind of feel like Robin is a good. Robin really wasn't in the second book, actually.
I was just thinking that he wasn't.
I kind of liked him in the first book, but I think that sort of is a discussion like the corporate cog. Like, you know, he's just like that broken millennial that's just like, I just listen to what my boss tells me. You know, like that kind of thing. So the way like the amount that she was like super mean to him, I think was not cool. Was being mad justified? Totally. But I think she was kind of like douchey about it, where he was like, it's my boss, like what am I supposed to do? Like I will lose my job.
This is making me think that the entire disconnect is there's a few moments where April May says something and he gets really like uncomfortable, but it's usually her saying like, "Cause you're my friend," and he's like, "Oh." So I think April May was more seeing him like a friend, and you held the secret from me, and he was probably just thinking, "I'm doing my job."
He's like, "I'm paying my student loans."
She comments all the time on on like how attractive he is and like thinks
If she
about
were
like,
gonna-
I thought they
if
were
she were
gonna
gonna
get
cheat on
together.
him,
and
it would
stuff.
be him.
I thought they were gonna get
Right.
together. I was like, ooh, and
Right.
then
And so
all of
I
a sudden
think
he's
that
gone.
like she viewed him different, like he was her client, like he worked for her. He was her client or what, like whatever that relationship was. And I also thought it was interesting because it shows how like the person at the top can control everybody else below from either side.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they just like buy up everything to put their hand in every pot so that they're always
Mhm.
successful.
It kind of made me think of like publishing in terms of like publishing,
Mhm.
putting out the liberal books and the conservative books and making money on both. And gets, you know, like,
Yeah, totally.
That's why I wasn't surprised at all. I was like, of course, it makes the most.
Yep.
You're getting money
Yeah.
from both sides. Like,
Yeah.
Yep. You're gonna win regardless of who wins.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was very much like a capitalism is not your friend, and I was like, well, yeah,
Yep.
duh.
I think it was also like a situation. So I understood and kind of was like, okay, that makes sense when April got so angry. I do agree that she probably was viewing him more as a friend than as an, like whatever he was.
Her
an independent
assistant.
contractor.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so if he was her assistant, I would expect him to have some type of like duty, like to make sure that
Loyalty.
Duty to
Yeah.
warn.
yeah, duty, like some
He's
type
not
of
her therapist.
not a
But
fiduciary.
she didn't
duty,
hire
but, like,
him.
Right,
Right,
but
She
yeah.
didn't
still
hire him.
working-
He was appointed to her though.
I know. But
Right,
she,
like, yeah,
obviously
she didn't hire
expected,
him,
like
she didn't pay
loyalty
him.
from
Totally.
him. Like,
Totally.
Right.
Like
this
her
is the
feelings
guy
are
in
still
her
valid.
emails and in her business. And so she's
Yeah.
trusting him to a level that she
Like-
felt like he betrayed. I
Yeah.
also would just be really salty because somebody
I'd be
kept
like,
the
"Get
secret from
out."
me. Yes,
Well,
me too.
I would
You're
equally be
fired.
mad, but I'm trying to think of like what his like what the rationale was behind that. But yeah, I would be mad. That was a shitty thing to do to somebody.
Yeah.
So I feel like her reaction was fine. Like, you've broken this barrier of trust.
Mhm.
Like, it's never coming back. Get out.
Yes.
Someone else can come in and do what you were doing. But like,
And then it's interesting that Andy takes him on as his guy.
Yes.
He's like, betrayed my best friend, but you can now work for me.
Well, then I mean that he goes in the Alta space right away too. I mean, like Andy,
Yeah.
you know, again, all of them are messy. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
big
all
old
right.
mess.
Any other thoughts on characters, themes, plots, moments?
I don't think we forgot
Not
anybody.
really.
All right. I think we did it. We did it. I mean, Connor only mostly did it.
I'll finish it at some point.
Yeah,
Maybe.
My library card
Dot.
expires, and I can't get it back because it's in a different city.
We're proud of you. Thank you for joining us, Connor. I guess now we announce our pick for October.
Oh no.
You see all of our faces already. We are unconvinced. We are thinking that next live show will be House Salt DNFs. We're going to read Dune. I don't even know what the author's name is.
Frank Herbert.
Frank Herbert. Thank you very much. We're going to try. We're going to attempt to read Dune.
Yeah, like we
I mean,
okay.
I have to read it for work, so I will be the one
do you
person
mean
finishing
So
you
it.
have
Gage is gonna be
to
the
read
one
it?
person to
Have to.
finish it.
It's
They
our
pay
book
you to
club at
read
work.
it? Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's
I
part
love
of our
that.
like corporate book club. Like we
Do
chose
they
that for
want
the
to hire
next 2
me
months.
for the book
So.
club? No, but like, okay, I want to know how everyone's feeling about it going into it.
A little
Bad.
daunted.
I will.
60 pages in and I understand nothing. That's all
I will
I'll say.
100% finish it. I don't know how much, but it will be 3-speed on audiobook. Like I will finish it. How much I will retain
Maddie,
and understand.
I don't think 3-speed is the right choice. For
I don't think it is either.
When I'm reading
read-
it, with my
I
audios,
don't think the audio is a good choice.
Mine is like,
either.
don't doubt me.
Don't doubt me. I just finished The Eye of the World. Well, not just finished, but I read Robert Jordan. That shit on 3-speed.
Ew, girl.
This feels a little bit like a school assignment for me,
does.
and it makes me feel good inside to know that there's a Spark Note version because high school Jordan would have done the same thing.
Listen,
You're taking me an hour-and-a-half video that like summarizes everything, and I will be watching that. So if you need that,
listen,
Totally.
guys,
Because I will try, but I do not.
So TikTok's been
yeah.
reading our Voxer messages, and so it knows that we're reading Dune because it's kept like recommending me Dune things, and now it will more Dune. And it's showing me videos explaining things. So I feel I've gotten like a little chart, and all the families and things. It's very nice.
You should
I
send
look at an
those.
ebook, so I can also look at it with my eyeballs while I'm
Yes.
listening at 3 speed.
Yes, it's a good
Yes.
idea.
Mhm.
I think it could be good if I get enough into it and the characters are interesting.
Two of my friends really liked it, and I'm honestly like, what happens that y'all ended up really raving about it?
I'm
so
going in
confused right now.
completely sightless. I have no idea what this book is about.
I just know it's set on a planet that has a big desert on it.
A lot of
You know
sand.
more than
Apparently,
I.
it's like a white savior like white savior narrative as well.
I've heard that.
Mary looks
yeah.
thrilled.
Here's the issue. Here's why I'm a little nervous. White men love this book. And I'm a little like,
Here I am.
straight white men.
Oh, never mind then.
So yeah, so I'm a little. It kind of feels like Bitcoin, where like they explain it to you, and I'm like, please fall off a cliff. I'm a little like nervous about that, but I'm excited. I kind of want to finish it so I can be like, actually, the book's about this. Like when they talk to me.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Okay, here's the thing about next book club, though, and for everybody thinking about joining it, just start it. And we're gonna pull a Connor next time, even if we don't finish
30%.
it.
No matter where we
We'll
are.
come together. We're gonna talk about how far we made it.
Some of us might have read Spark Notes. Some of us might have read the graphic novel. Maybe somebody played the board game.
I've already seen the trailer for the adaptation, so I feel like I'm miles ahead.
Where is the adaptation come? Is that a movie? Is it a TV show?
It's a movie. There's some
And it's coming out
beautiful people in it.
mid October, like 22nd,
In-
I think is the release.
in theaters. Some
I'm
of us might
not
go see the movie.
because it is a whatever owns HBO Max owns it.
I do want to watch the movie though because Daddy Oscar Isaac's in it. So
So
Didn't
many
Kayla
good
say
people are
there's
in
a
Jason
board
Momoa.
game?
Jason Momoa is in it. That's right. Oh my god, so
You
exciting!
need to watch it for the hot people. Like,
And
that's the
I think
only reason.
Zendaya's in
Aquaman?
it too.
Zendaya's in it.
Nice.
Gonna be so
Everyone's
good.
pretty. And then that emaciated guy, that guy that's all sickly looking, is the lead. The guy that looks like he has pneumonia in the Victorian era. He looks like he's dying of
Let me look up
Emaciated.
He does look very hungry. Yes.
That looks very hungry.
He always looks like he has a slight sheen from the flu. Like,
What does this guy look like?
when you see him, you're gonna know exactly what I
What's
mean.
his name?
Timothy Chalamet.
Timothy Chalamet.
Timothy.
You're gonna be
The
like,
two
wow, he does
guys.
look like he has
But with
a
like an
thing
E and an
about
instead of an H and a Y.
Oh, yeah, I get it.
He's very skinny. That guy. He's a sandwich. Poor guy.
He needs a sandwich.
I mean, that fits for the character.
An
though, because
IV
apparently
bag.
The character is very small for his age, according to the book so far.
Good.
That's the one thing I understood.
Good. Okay.
Oh, it's also got the woman from Mission Impossible in it. That's
Jordan,
that woman looks
who?
familiar.
Jordan.
Like, I feel like we would know.
Like what? The woman from Mission Impossible. Like that's like a known person.
The
I've
woman
seen
from
them,
the-
so I recognized her face. I don't know.
All right, join us next month. Well, no,
I know.
yes, next month.
Next one?
Yeah, because October, right? You said
Is
it's
this our
October's book.
October pick or our September
You said
pick?
October.
I don't know.
Are we?
October.
We don't have
are we
enough
reading?
time.
Wait.
We don't have enough time for September. We're not doing
Okay,
that.
so our October pick.
So we're doing like
Why not
one book
October?
over 2 months.
A
Yes,
month
the
and
book
a
is
half.
700
Wait, didn't
pages
Kayla
long.
and a
wanted to read
half.
something?
Month and a half.
Yeah.
So it'll be
I
our
picked
spooky pick.
September on purpose because it was supposed to be BookNet Fest or something like that. So this is our October
Yeah.
pick.
Yes,
Yeah.
October.
Okay.
That works.
Sure.
All right. Well, join us. It is sure to be a fun time, if nothing else.
Yes.
And thank you for watching this month, and we will see you guys soon.
Bye.
Bye.